Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, with a presentation that will take a look at Roosevelt's second New Deal, with a focus on the reforms that gave it a different character, with its emphasis on a fairer society. The first major act we'll look at is the National Labour Relations Act, or Wagner Act, named after Senator Robert Wagner, who oversaw its passing, and it came into effect in July 1935. Trade unionism had faced a difficult time in America, where such an emphasis was placed on the individual and self-help rather than the collective. Individual rights and individual responsibilities were America's watchword. What is more, some employers, Henry Ford for example, were prepared to be ruthless in preventing trade unions forming in their plants or factories. And the Red Scare had hardly helped matters. Then, with the Great Depression and mass unemployment, trade unionism was further weakened, as men were willing to take almost any job, no matter the wage and no matter the conditions. Still, in the early 1930s, labour unrest actually grew, and it was led by unemployed workers. So the Wagner Act supported the right for workers to form trade unions, preventing employers from sacking workers who joined a trade union, and it gave trade unions the right to negotiate with employers for better pay and better conditions. As a result, trade unions gradually gained more power, and employers had to listen to them, though, as you'll see, not all did. You'll remember that the NRA had given workers the right to join a trade union and bargain collectively. But of course, the NRA was a voluntary scheme. So when the Wagner Act gave legal protection to trade unions and their members, membership of unions rapidly grew. From only 3 million members in 1933, there were 7 million by the end of 1937, and more than 9 million by 1939. Though some employers continued to defy the government and more unrest ensued. There was serious unrest in both the steel industry and the car industry, with 10 people killed in the infamous Memorial Day massacre in Chicago in 1937. Still, workers' rights were further strengthened when in 1938 the government introduced the Fair Labour Standards Act, which legally set maximum hours of work and minimum wages. It also banned the employment of children under the age of 16 in a range of industries, but not on farms. So the voluntary codes set by the NRA were now backed by the force of law. The Act resulted in pay increases for around 300,000 employees and shorter working hours for well over 1 million more. But the violence with which unions and some corporations fought each other had been brutal. The third measure we'll take a look at was the Social Security Act of August 1935, which aimed to give America a basic welfare state. State governments would work with federal government to provide help for the sick, the blind, and people with other handicaps, as well as the needy, for example mothers with dependent children. There would also be a national system for unemployment insurance, with contributions from employers and workers, but run at state level. Each state would run its own social security program, and decide how much should be paid out. And at a federal level, old age pensions at 65, as well as pensions for widows, were also provided. Employers and employees started paying into the fund in 1937, and the first pensions were paid out in 1940. Like similar schemes in Europe, it was a partnership between employer, employee, and state. Payouts were small though. Old age pensions in 1940 were only $10 a month. A blind person in New York received only $5 a week, at a time when the average monthly wage was $80. But it was something, and it was intended that this would only be a start. It would take time before the country would be ready to accept a livable sum. But it established the principle of government responsibility for the unemployed, the sick, and the handicapped, as well as for the old. Roosevelt considered the Social Security Act to be the greatest achievement coming out of the New Deal. Much of the credit, however, should go to Frances Perkins, the Secretary of Labour and the first woman to hold such a prominent position in an administration. Indeed, she only accepted the position when Roosevelt agreed to her ideas for a national scheme for unemployment and old age insurance. There were criticisms of the Act and of Roosevelt, but how both these measures were received will have to be the focus of a future presentation. This presentation is over, except for me to thank you so much for listening. Cheers.